panel of the day, India, the Promised Land. We've kind of gone around the world. We've been to Africa, we've been over to Asia, but this is such a massive market, and it's poised to reclaim its title of the fastest growing economy and on the brink of joining the US and China in that G3 power trio. But India has to navigate some hurdles when it comes to structure to rise as that global economic titan that it will surely be whilst it's continuing to accelerate that growth. So on the stage, when we've moved some flowers, we will be discussing India, the Promised Land, and I'd like to invite to the stage Abid Junaid, the Managing Director of Radiant Star Group, 25 years of experience in retail, real estate and facilities, and heralding from Tamil Nadu. Please come on up to the stage. Vish Narain, also following close behind, Managing Partner at Pulsar Group with 2 decades in private equity experience. And Vanessa Xu is coming back from VS Partners to moderate this session. There we go, Vanessa, and enjoy.
Thanks everyone for staying late into the lunch hours for this final session, but we leave the best speakers to the last as the closing panel of the summit. So without further ado, we have 2 specifically invited speaking guests. One is running operating businesses in consumer sector in general, so exposed to the secular growth of India in that matter. And one is a veteran private equity investor who also invests in operating business, but in the finance space, so would offer a slightly different perspective about the fundamentals of India and the challenges as well. I will just jump right into it. Mr. Abid, from a business operator standpoint, there are these narratives in media in general about India. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's the China-India competition, so the elephant versus the dragon, that's a headline. And now there are questions about whether India is next China. These are parallels that's easily drawn by the mass media that creates certain perceptions and linear or binary comparisons across many industries and factors of the economy. You operating in a sector that's mostly exposed to the large population, and can you comment as from your perspective in the real businesses, how do you see those parallels drawn? Where are the flaws of those parallels, if there are?
Firstly, India is a federal structure. So you have the central government, and then you have the local state governments, and there is there are laws and regulations which are different from some states to other states. So it's not like China where you have a centralized system which probably would drive the economy in a very unitary way. So we have pockets of affluence and let's say liberalization in India in certain states, and then other states will be backward. So it's pretty much a localized thing when it comes to India. But then there are certain other things which are federal in nature, which is the labor regulations, the labor laws, which are pretty much consistent for the whole of India. Compared to China, the infrastructure is poor in India, and there is a lot of emphasis on that one to improve the infrastructure. And that is the biggest challenge that India would face. But in terms of skilled workforce, I think we have a large workforce in India. Plus, there are almost 12 million skilled workforce coming into the employment scene every year. And in terms of educational literacy, it is quite high, and skill level is quite high. So we have a very large workforce, and pretty much most of them are English speaking as well. So language proficiency is there. And also the ports, India has got a vast coastline, so when it looks at the number of ports are there. The efficiency of the ports have to be increased, have to be improved, but we have several ports dotting the entire coastline. And also today, if you look at geopolitically, countries want to have an alternate manufacturing base outside China. So that is also giving an impetus in terms of the FDI into India and specifically into manufacturing. You also have today, manufacturing in IT and other industries as well. And we have one of the largest startups in India as a startup ecosystem.
Of things you mentioned, one is the workforce, but under the headline of workforce, I do want to circle back on what the specifics about the workforce there that might drive certain different types of growth. Another one is the investment capex into the manufacturing space, and we'll dive deeper into those topics. So, Vish, you are investing in a country representing global capital, and for a long time. And I was in private equity business before as well, and I had a associate Indian office too. And often heard from private equity, it's difficult to make money in India, and there are many conventional wisdom, so to speak, of why that is the case. So can you tell us what has been changing and what has changed?
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa. So appreciate being on this panel. So firstly, you mentioned China. I think both India and China 200 years ago had roughly 25% of the GDP each. Right? So together, they were about half the global GDP. And I think over the next 50 years, we'll go back to that state where India and China, of course, large populations and also very large middle class and rising incomes will get there. So I think both countries have a very bright future. Of course, countries have gone through ups and downs. China may be going through a slight lull at the moment, but there is no doubt that both these economies, one was known as the tiger, the other as the elephant, but they'll all be formidable forces in the future. In terms of the differences between India and China, I think in China, a lot works because of the government. And the government is a major driver of capex, of infrastructure spend. In India, the country works despite the government, right? It's on the basis of a lot of the entrepreneurial talent that India has. And I think it's this soft infrastructure, which is the difference between the two countries in many ways. If you see Indian executives, whether it's here in the Middle East, they're running a lot of the large companies here. In the US, 30 of the Fortune 500 companies are run by Indian CEOs. So there's a lot of Indian talent, which is the reason for why India is growing so much, despite the fact that the government hasn't played as proactive a role in its growth as much as the Chinese government has. So that's number one. Number two, and what people don't realize as much is that because of the adversity and the lack of capital, Indian businesses are very capital efficient. If you look at the ROICs of Indian businesses as a total, as a sector, the listed market, the average ROICs is 25, 26%. The rest of the world is almost 1,000 basis points lower. Right? So that makes a big difference in terms of, because of the adversity, because of the lack of the capital, Indian entrepreneurs have stretched that capital, have made tech companies and other companies thrive with little resources, right? And I think that's the reason why a lot of the businesses in India are much more attractive. And finally, to answer your question around capital coming in and going out, I think over the last 5 years or so, the Indian stock market has been very, very attractive. Valuations have been very good. The total stock market now is almost 5 trillion. So private equity funds have got a lot of exits over the last 3-4 years.
Local exits.
Local exits. So we are not reliant only on strategic investors coming in or other private equity investors coming in. So the local stock market, like in China 10 years ago, is now very robust, and it's actually a great market to invest in now.
I want to circle back on just the comment of high ROIC and the capital discipline organically built in the Indian business culture because of the lack of capital. But on the flip side, a lot of the growth sectors these days, smart infrastructure, green energy, green power, and AI infrastructures, these are huge capex-driven sectors, and the business models built on them requires a huge capex as well. So credit expansion, given it's a young population, might not be a bad thing. And how does India drive healthy credit expansion and the leverage to build on top of its other, human capital ingenuity to amplify and augment that growth rather than being constrained by the capital discipline?
No, good question, Vanessa. I think it's a double-edged sword. I think Indian businesses are less leveraged. GDP as debt as a percentage of GDP is sub 25%. The US is obviously 200%. China is at 60%. So the leverage levels in India are much lower, and that's because of the high cost of debt. Now, why is the cost of debt high? It's high because of higher inflation. It's high because the currency depreciates. But what is going to change over the next 2-3 years is the fact that Indian exports now are at about 750 billion, and Indian imports are at about 880 billion. So in a couple of years, the exports are growing at 18% a year. So in a couple of years, there'll be a tipping point where the exports will outpace the imports, particularly if oil remains stable in this price range, because India is a net energy importer. So if that happens, then the currency becomes very stable, like China's did for a long time. The RMB was a very stable currency, which brings down the interest rates, and that allows the debt markets to thrive much, much more. And you can't build infrastructure at borrowing rates of 10-12%. You can only build it because the inherent return on infrastructure is not that high. Yeah. So you can only build it when interest rates are low. So we are reaching that point where the stable interest rates will come in, and the debt markets in India will become much more attractive than they have been. But it's important for that to happen, for India to really embark on a capex spend, which will be the next phase of growth.
Let me turn to the operator. So how do you build your business? You are riding a long-term tailwind of demographics, urbanization, industrialization. All these trends had happened in other emerging markets as well at different phases of history. But how do you build your business riding these trends? What is your business model? When you look around the world for fellow businesses in your similar industry, how do you see you build your business in India differently from them?
Well, we are the infrastructure business. So as part of the infrastructure, we are into housing. We are also into roads construction as well. Now, as far as housing is concerned, there is a huge urbanization which is happening in India, and we have a shortage of housing. Now, in the housing market, there is the mortgages market is quite strong in the sense that eligible people are able to get mortgages at interest rates of 8% to 9%, which is not very high for the mortgage industry itself. And the challenge in the property development in India is the cost of the land, which is high, but not so much when it comes to the demand for the housing itself. So we have plenty of demand. It is only the challenge is the finding the right land at the right price. If you were to look outside the suburban cities, our suburban areas of the major metropolitan cities, the land price will be much lower there. Unfortunately, the connectivity to the center in terms of road and infrastructure may not be as good, and that is the reason why the suburban areas are not able to progress, in the way that they should. So if you look at private developers or private industry like us, the challenge between, let's say in India, is that we cannot control the government's infrastructure. So when much of the development is within our boundaries, and what happens outside the boundary, it's for the government to do it. And if they're not able to, cope up to that, to the requirements of connectivity in terms of transportation, public transportation, and other connectivity, then obviously there is an issue when it comes to the overall development itself. And that is the difference between, let us say, we're also doing it in Dubai. We have proper development here. We know when it comes to infrastructure, we are not really worried at all, be it, road or power or water or sewerage. And that is the difference, I think, the main challenge or the difference between what we do in India and elsewhere in the world.
Okay. So I just visited the National Infrastructure Investment Fund, which champions public and private sector capital into building infrastructure as an enabler to private operators like Abid's business. So, Porsche, how do you see the model of in India that solves this capital shortage issue as to investing foundational long-term infrastructure, all kinds of infrastructure that can enable other industries? And what are the solutions that the financial sectors are providing?
No, it's an important initiative. I think it's a very small fund today. It's only a $10 billion fund. India.
Just an example of a.
It's a great example, I think, and if you look at other sovereign funds, they're much, much larger, right? So China's sovereign fund is, more than 2 trillion. The regional funds here are 700-800 billion. India now has enough foreign exchange reserves. They're close to $700 billion. So I think that's an area where India should focus much more on and build a much larger sovereign fund which does the infrastructure works which are basic for all these other industries. And it's important to make it 10x, right? Not just 10 billion, but make it a $100 billion fund and expand the remit of it. I think it's a good start, but a long way ahead.
But granted, either operating a business or operating a fund with all the current constraints, that is the boundaries we all need to operate in an imperfect world, what are the opportunities that you are seeing that you are very excited about?
The economy is growing at 7 to 8%. And, there is an opportunity in practically every sphere in India, be it housing, be it infrastructure, be it manufacturing. I think or even investment in stock markets and other things. The opportunity is I think, in my opinion, is endless. Of course, because it's a large country with a large economy, and we are only focusing on the infrastructure business only. But if you ask me, I think the opportunities are endless.
I think the opportunities, particularly around technology, are quite massive. Because again of...
Can you expand on what technology meant?
Sure. So I think if you look at foundational technologies, if you look at the mobile sector, for example, if you look at communications, the rest of the world was building over the 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of copper wires, landline infrastructure, which India has very limited, only 35 million landlines. Right? India was able to leapfrog that and now have 1.3 billion mobile connections. So it actually avoided building that physical infrastructure and just went to a mobility-based solution. Similarly, on the fintech side, India has only 250,000 bank branches, but they have 300 million people on what is called a UPI, United Payment Interface, which allows payments, small payments, instant payments from peer-to-peer as well as from people to institutions. And that instant payment interface now, Vanessa, has become so big that it is 40% of the global payments, instant payments that occur. And they've caused the fact, it's now caused the fact that we've leapfrogged the need for building more bank branches, having more debit cards. So I think these fundamental technologies which are more efficient, which are cheaper, are allowing the country to leapfrog building physical infrastructure, which otherwise would be much more expensive and would take a lot of time.
Yeah. So I want to come back to the business operators. Real estate is interesting in the sense that you naturally see from your business the growth of industry clusters, the migration of labor, the boundaries or the breakdown of boundaries between provinces, and the formation of urbanization, or the model of urbanization, which in different countries there are different models of urbanization. All of these very important macro trends are managed by you every day as a real estate operator. So can you comment on this from your business? How do you see the model of urbanization? What is unique about it? Migration of industries, migration of manufacturing sectors, people, what's happening there?
And in India, the migration is not controlled. It is more organic. There are clusters in which there are industrial clusters, manufacturing clusters. So people migrate towards that one for employment purposes. But even otherwise, the growth of the cities in India is happening without any centralized planning or any push towards a move towards a city because of better quality or better standard of living. It happens, as I said, organically. And the emphasis here is on not on the inner cities, but within the cities, having the suburban areas and satellite cities, as we call it, coming around the major metropolises. And that is where the urbanization is happening, around satellite cities. And much of the development that is happening today also is happening in these satellite cities of the major metropolitan cities.
Yeah. I was asking that because it's a very different model from China, as to mega cities are centrally planned and very carefully orchestrated from infrastructure to services, etc. So the model will entail very different other businesses to proliferate on top of it. So to Vish, what are you investing now? TPG is a global organization. I trust you adopt the methodology of a global comparison of different phases of economies, and there are lessons to be learned on both sides of the equation. So what are the, as you give the outlook for next 10 years, what are the things that the world might be wowed by? These are the Indian lessons that we didn't expect, or the world will be also negatively surprised. Wow, these are the things that we have not thought about, the risks about India.
So look, we invest in capital efficient companies, so companies in the technology, healthcare, and consumer sectors. Those are broad sectors, and there are many sub-verticals within that which are exciting. But I think, as Abid said, there's a lot of secular growth opportunities in India. Right? If you look at the rest of the world, Europe is dead, Japan is sleeping, US has a cold, and China has COVID. Right? So effectively, India is the only large economy where you can invest. Right? So there's a lot of capital that will come into India, and there's a secular growth across a lot of sectors. So it's a good place to look at to invest over the next decade.
Although it's a late lunch hour, but I'm aware that the audience is actually very, very attentive to your speaking. So I'm going to open the floor for a few minutes of questions to see if anyone have any questions to our operator and investor from India. If not, then I will thank our... Oh, sorry.
I suddenly missed out there.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a gentleman here at the back, please, and then one at the front.
Hello, Vish. Hello, Anisha. So this is second year running here. So Vish, you actually presented a nice point about Europe is dead. India is coming up, and of course China has, and you spoke about all this paradigm primarily around India and China. How do you see basically the advancements that we have seen in China primarily happening around most of the categories? Maybe let's take example of healthcare. How do you see these two countries at partnering, and how do you see basically the trade going up, investments going up, and how do you see the future of capital movement across these countries?
Look, it's a little unfortunate that over the last 4 or 5 years, the geopolitical realities and the relationship between the countries are not as good as they should be. India and China combined would be a formidable force if they were closer partners, because they are natural trade partners. They share one of the largest contiguous land borders. Both the cultures are very similar. So I think if there were to be greater collaboration, I think they would be a very formidable force to deal with from a Western perspective. But I think in the short term, I think the flow of capital is actually going out rather than in. So for the short term at least, I think I don't see too much capital from China coming into India and vice versa. But hopefully things will improve for the better in the future.
Thank you. My name is Dennis. I'm technical architect from AI company Optriment. And my question is, could you please share your ideas how to build a good, strong partnership with Indian colleagues? Thank you.
You want to take it? Look, I think one thing about Indian entrepreneurs is that they are everywhere in the world, right? So Indians are here in the UAE, they're in the US, Europe, most of the countries, and the entrepreneurial talent in India is very strong. So one way to start is to look at reaching out to the local embassies where they have a very strong outreach program, depending on the sector that you're interested in. There are also organizations like NASSCOM, like sector organizations that focus on either IT services or manufacturing or data centers or technology. So they are the ones who promote those sectors within the country. So depending on your interest, your sector, there are various bodies that can facilitate a closer interaction between you and the Indian companies and entrepreneurs.
Thank you. As a co-founder of Superbridge, I have the privilege maybe to steal one question to end the panel. We often go to a promised land to seek opportunities, and when people do that, they usually ask the local expert of, what should I do? But I'm going to flip that question as to, if people are going to India look for opportunities, what should they not do? What's your advice of one thing don't do in India in order to be successful?
Well, I would say that do not expect a quick return. You are in for the long run. I think you should stick around, have faith, and let the system take over, and then I'm surely, in the end, it'll be very productive.
Vish?
Yeah, I would second that, but I would also add that if you go in, work with a reliable partner. I think having the right promoters or the right founders is very important. It's a large country, and I think a lot of people have lost money partnering with not the right partners. So making sure doing due diligence on the partner and making sure they come from a strong reputation, pedigree, is a great way to protect yourself and not lose money.
Find the right people and be patient. Thank you so much for the final panel of the summit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.